It was a peaceful Sunday morning. The streets were quiet, the sun was gentle, and the air smelled fresh after last night's rain. Maya Thompson, a 38-year-old black woman, was driving home from her shift at the local animal shelter. She wasn't in uniform that day, just jeans, a hoodie, and an old baseball cap that said U.S. Army K-9 Unit. Her truck was simple but clean, with a small sticker on the back that read, Veteran Inside. In the back seat, 2 large dogs sat calmly. Rex and Shadow, both Belgian Malinois, her trusted partners from her military years. Maya hummed quietly to herself, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. She had done this route hundreds of times before, from the shelter to her small farmhouse just outside town. It was her peaceful moment of the week, but today something felt off. In her rearview mirror, she noticed flashing red and blue lights. One police car at first, then another. Within seconds, 4 patrol vehicles boxed her in from behind and both sides. Her heart skipped. She wasn't speeding. She wasn't doing anything wrong. Still, she slowed down carefully and pulled into an empty parking lot near a grocery store. The tires crunched over gravel as she stopped. Her hands stayed on the wheel, calm and visible. The dogs behind her perked their ears but didn't move. They could sense tension and their training kicked in, silent, alert, waiting for her cue. 2 police officers stepped out first, hands resting on their holsters. One shouted, "Turn off the engine and step out of the vehicle." His voice was harsh, more like a threat than a request. Maya rolled down her window halfway. "Officer, may I ask what's wrong?" she said politely. "License and registration." The man barked again, ignoring her question. Her chest tightened, but she stayed calm. "Sure," she said softly. She reached slowly toward the glove box, moving in clear sight. Her every action was deliberate. She had trained soldiers in restraint before. Now she was using that same discipline to protect herself. As she handed over her license, she noticed 3 more officers approaching. One circled behind her truck, one peered into the back seat, and another muttered something under his breath that made the others smirk. She caught only a word, typical. Her mind started racing. She'd been through enough in life to know what that meant. But she reminded herself, stay calm. Don't react. Let them show who they are. "Why did you stop me, officer?" she asked again, steady but firm. The man holding her license sneered slightly. "You fit the description of a suspect we're looking for." Maya blinked. "A suspect?" "Black woman, dark hoodie, older truck," he said flatly. "We're doing a routine check." Routine check. She'd heard those words before, but never in this tone. Her jaw tightened. She looked at the name on his badge. Officer Daniels. "I see," she said. "Well, I can assure you I haven't done anything wrong." He didn't reply. Instead, another officer, a younger one, tried to open her back door. The dogs growled low, a deep warning sound from the back seat. "Control your animals," one of them shouted. "They're fine," Maya said calmly. "They're trained working dogs. They don't move unless I tell them." But her calm voice only seemed to irritate them more. One of the officers whispered, "She's acting too confident. Must be hiding something." Maya could feel the situation sliding in a dangerous direction. The officers' voices grew louder, their movements sharper. They weren't interested in finding a suspect, and they were looking for control. Inside her, the soldier in her began to awaken, the part of her that had survived desert patrols, explosions, and long nights of fear. She knew fear wasn't an option. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Daniels barked again. She took a breath. "I will, officer, but please keep your hands visible. My dogs are trained to defend on command. I'd prefer everyone stay safe." He laughed mockingly. "Oh, really? What are they, police dogs?" She met his eyes through the window. "Military," she said. "Just like me." For a moment he hesitated, but pride made him look away. "Step out now." Maya slowly opened her door, hands visible, posture straight. Her heart was steady. She had faced worse than this. The cold wind brushed her cheek as she stepped onto the gravel. One of the officers muttered under his breath, "She's too calm. Something's off." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Behind her, Rex and Shadow sat perfectly still, eyes locked on the officers through the glass. Their gaze was intense, almost human. They didn't bark. They didn't lunge. They just waited. Maya looked around. 4 officers, hands near their weapons, circling her like a threat. People across the street had started to notice, pulling out phones, filming from a distance. She stood silently, her back straight, her eyes firm. "You've made a mistake," she said quietly. "But go ahead. Finish your check." Something in her voice made even the loudest officer pause. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defiance. It was authority, the kind that comes from years of command from someone who's seen the worst and still chooses calm. Inside the truck, the two dogs shifted slightly. The tension in the air thickened. A single wrong move could turn this into chaos. But Maya didn't flinch. She had learned long ago. Sometimes the most powerful weapon in a hostile world isn't anger or violence. It's silence, confidence, and the quiet reminder that power doesn't always wear a uniform. And as the officers exchanged uneasy glances, Maya knew one thing for sure. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Not yet. The wind picked up as Maya stood by her truck, her calm eyes meeting the officers who surrounded her. The tension in the air was heavy, a kind of silence that came before a storm. Her dogs, Rex and Shadow, were still watching from the back seat, their sharp eyes following every movement outside. Officer Daniel stepped closer, his boots crunching against the gravel. He still held her driver's license, turning it in his hand like it meant nothing. "So, Sergeant Maya Thompson," he said mockingly, reading her name. "You're military, huh? Doesn't mean you can do whatever you want." Maya's voice was even. "I didn't do anything wrong, officer. I was just driving home, but Daniels didn't care." He leaned slightly toward her. "You fit the description. Female, dark hoodie, old truck." She raised an eyebrow. "That's your description? Sounds like half the people in this town." One of the younger cops, Officer Hayes, snickered quietly, trying to hide his smile. Daniel shot him a glare and barked, "Check the vehicle!" Maya's head turned sharply. "No one touches my dogs," she said firmly. The officer froze mid-step. "They're just dogs, ma'am." Her eyes narrowed. "No, they're soldiers. And they don't take orders from strangers." Daniel scoffed. "What are you talking about? They're animals, not soldiers." Maya took a single step forward. Her voice dropped lower and steady, cold, the kind that made men listen. "Rex and Shadow served in Afghanistan. They found bombs, saved lives, and survived firefights you can't even imagine. They're veterans, just like me." The group went quiet for a moment, but Daniels wasn't ready to back down. He puffed out his chest, trying to reassert control. "Look, lady," he said, "we got a report about a stolen vehicle matching this description. If you've got nothing to hide, you won't mind us looking around." Maya's tone didn't change. "Do you have a warrant?" He smirked. "We don't need one if we have probable cause." "Probable cause based on what?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "My skin color or my truck?" The other officers shifted uncomfortably. Hayes looked away, pretending to check his radio. Daniel's face turned red, but he kept his voice loud. "You're making this harder on yourself." Maya gave a small laugh. Not cruel, but sad. That's what people always say when they realize they've already gone too far. One of the cops began circling toward the back of her truck again. Inside, Rex's ears pricked up. A low rumble vibrated in his throat, deep and dangerous. Shadow's muscles tensed beside him. They didn't bark, and they didn't need to. Their silence was louder than any threat. "Control your animals," Daniel shouted, hand twitching near his holster. "They're perfectly controlled," Maya replied calmly. "More than some people here." The words hung heavy in the air. Daniels took a step closer, his voice sharp. "Don't get smart with me, ma'am." She didn't blink. "Then don't get reckless with me, officer." For a moment, no one moved. The sound of cars passing in the distance was the only thing breaking the silence. A man across the street had started filming with his phone. He whispered to his friend, "What's happening?" "She doesn't look like a criminal." Daniels noticed the cameras and grew angrier. "Turn those off," he barked, pointing at the bystanders. But they didn't listen. People knew better now. Cameras protected the truth. Maya could see the unease building among the younger officers. She took a deep breath and said, "I suggest you run my plate before you embarrass yourselves further." Daniels ignored her and shouted at Hayes, "Pop the trunk." But before Hayes could move, Maya's calm voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Hayes froze mid-step. "Why not?" She looked him dead in the eye. "Because if you make one sudden move, those two dogs will be out here faster than your hand can reach your gun. And they won't be confused about who the threat is." The officers exchanged nervous glances. Even Daniels hesitated now. He'd seen police dogs before, but these ones, even behind glass, radiated something else. Discipline, precision, power. You threatening us with dogs, lady? Daniels snapped. Maya shook her head. No, I'm promising you that I'm not the one you should fear. I trained them to protect people who do the right thing. Which means if you stay calm, you'll be just fine. Her tone was so steady, so sure that even the younger officers began to lower their hands from their weapons. But Daniels wasn't ready to lose face. He stepped even closer, trying to intimidate her. Do you know what happens when someone refuses to cooperate with law enforcement? He said in a low growl. Maya met his gaze. Do you know what happens when law enforcement forgets who they're supposed to serve? That was it. His jaw tightened. All right, he said. You asked for it. He gestured to his partner. Let's move in. As two of the officers advanced, Maya gave a single, quiet whistle, a sound so soft most people would have missed it, but Rex and Shadow didn't. Inside the truck, their posture changed instantly. Heads low, eyes locked on the threat, muscles ready. The officers didn't know it yet, but the next few seconds would flip the entire situation upside down. And for the first time that morning, it wouldn't be Maya who felt fear. It would be the men who thought they held the power. The moment Maya's soft whistle touched the air, everything seemed to stop. The sound was barely audible, but for Rex and Shadow it was a command they knew better than their own heartbeat. Inside the truck, the two military dogs went from calm to combat ready in a single breath. Their bodies lowered, eyes sharp, and muscles coiled like springs waiting for release. The officers didn't notice at first. They were too focused on looking tough. Officer Daniels motioned to the others, his voice dripping with arrogance. Move her away from the vehicle. Let's see what she's hiding. One of the younger cops, Officer Hayes, hesitated. Sir, maybe we should run her plates first, he murmured. But Daniels waved him off with a glare. You follow orders, Hayes, I'll handle this. Maya stood still, her posture straight and unshaken. Her face was calm, but her eyes were unblinking, cold and watchful, just like they had been years ago on the battlefield. She could see their mistakes before they made them. She had seen fear take the same shape in enemy soldiers, right before everything went wrong. You're making a big mistake, officer, she said softly. Daniels smirked. You think your dogs scare me? She didn't answer. She just said one word in a low, foreign tone. Stand by. The word hit like lightning. The dog's ears pricked forward. They both sat upright in perfect sync, their sharp gazes locked on the officers outside. Their stillness wasn't peaceful. It was a warning. Even Hayes stepped back, his eyes wide. What the hell? He whispered. They're not even barking. Maya tilted her head slightly. They don't bark unless it's too late. Daniels clenched his jaw and walked closer, trying to show control. Open the back seat, he ordered one of the other officers. Let's see what kind of animal she's keeping. The officer reached for the door handle, his hand trembling slightly. Before he could touch it, Rex growled, a deep rumbling sound that didn't come from his throat but from somewhere deeper, something primal. It rolled across the air like thunder. The officer froze mid-motion. Sir, he said nervously. Daniels glared at him. Open it, they're just dogs. They're not just dogs, Maya said calmly, taking a step forward. Those are soldiers, and they're waiting for permission. Daniels ignored her, shouting louder, trying to drown out his own unease. Do it! The officer swallowed hard and pulled the handle. The door cracked open just an inch, and that inch was enough. Both dogs moved in a blur of precision. They didn't jump out, didn't attack. Instead, they slid forward until their massive heads filled the open gap. Teeth bared just enough to glint in the sunlight. The sound that followed wasn't a growl. It was silence, the kind that makes your spine tighten. Every officer stepped back instinctively. Even Daniels froze, realizing he was now standing too close. Rex's eyes locked onto his hand, which still hovered near his gun. Shadow's gaze stayed fixed on the other officer's throat. They didn't blink. They didn't move. Just waited. Maya's voice cut through the heavy silence like a blade. You're surrounded now, aren't you? Daniels turned his head sharply toward her. What did you say? You surrounded me a few minutes ago, she said, her tone calm and deliberate. But look around, officer. You're the one surrounded now. Not by guns, not by violence, but by your own fear. No one spoke. The other officers looked at her, then at Daniels, then at the dogs. Sweat ran down his temple. The two dogs hadn't moved an inch, but their presence filled the entire parking lot. Finally, Maya gave a low, Two-syllable command in German, zurückhalten. Instantly, both dogs relaxed slightly, stepping back but keeping their eyes locked on the men. Stand down, Daniels barked, his voice cracking. Hayes finally found his courage and whispered, Sir, maybe we should confirm her identity. She's clearly trained. Those are military dogs, not pets. Daniels turned on him angrily, but Maya interrupted. He's right. You should have checked first before drawing your conclusions. She reached into her pocket slowly, making sure they could see her movements. From her jacket, she pulled out a laminated card and tossed it onto the hood of her truck. The wind flipped it slightly, revealing her military ID. Officer Hayes picked it up, his eyes widening. Sir, she's a retired U.S. Army sergeant. Co. 9 Division, 15 years of service, 2 medals. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Yeah, she said quietly, her tone almost sad. You pulled over the wrong woman. For the first time since the stop began, Maya reached back and opened the truck door fully. Rex and Shadow stepped out slowly, their paws silent on the gravel. They stood beside her, calm, disciplined, majestic. The officers backed up instinctively, though the dogs didn't even growl now. Maya crossed her arms. You thought you were in control because of your badges, she said softly. But control doesn't come from fear. It comes from knowing who you are and respecting who others are. Daniels looked down at the ground, red-faced. The crowd across the street was still filming. Phones were everywhere now, capturing every second. Maya looked at the youngest officer, Hayes, and said, You did the right thing by hesitating. Don't lose that instinct. It'll save lives one day. Then she turned to Daniels, her gaze sharp but not cruel. Now, are you ready to do your job properly, or are we done pretending? And for the first time since the stop began, no one had anything left to say. The air felt heavy, like the whole world was holding its breath. The flashing lights from the police cars painted the parking lot in streaks of red and blue, bouncing off Maya's calm face. Her dogs, Rex and Shadow, stood beside her in perfect silence, their eyes locked on the trembling officers. The crowd on the other side of the street had grown larger. Phones were out. Every second was being recorded. Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The power in her stillness was enough to make the officers step back without realizing it. You've done enough, she said softly, her words cutting through the air sharper than any shout could. Officer Daniels tried to recover his voice, but it cracked mid-sentence. You're obstructing a lawful investigation, he stammered. Maya's gaze didn't waver. Lawful? You never even told me what I did wrong. Daniels clenched his fist, his pride fighting his fear. You fit the description. He snapped again. She tilted her head slightly. A black woman in a truck? That's your description? His mouth opened, but no words came. The other officers stayed silent, shame spreading among them like a slow wave. Maya stepped closer. Her boots crunched softly against the gravel. You see, officers, she said quietly, I've dealt with men who thought they had power before. Some wore uniforms, some carried rifles. But all of them had one thing in common. They thought my calm meant weakness. Her words landed hard. She pointed toward Rex and Shadow. These dogs have stood beside me under gunfire. They've dragged wounded soldiers out of explosions. They don't care what color your skin is. They only know loyalty, honor, and discipline, things you seem to have forgotten. The younger officer, Hayes, finally spoke up. Ma'am, he said gently, we didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? She interrupted, her voice sharp for the first time. Didn't mean to assume. Didn't mean to humiliate me, or didn't mean to get caught doing it on camera. The words cut deep. Hayes lowered his eyes. Even Daniels couldn't meet her gaze. A faint breeze passed, rustling the nearby trees. Maya's expression softened slightly. She didn't want to destroy them. She wanted them to learn. She took a slow breath and said, You know, when I joined the military, I believed in rules. Rules meant fairness. But out here, she glanced at their badges. Out here, rules bend depending on who's standing in front of you. Daniel's radio crackled suddenly, the dispatcher's voice breaking the silence. All units. The suspect vehicle was located 2 miles east. Repeat, 2 miles east. Stand down from current engagement. Everyone froze. The officers exchanged looks. Their suspect had already been caught somewhere else. Maya smiled faintly, but it wasn't a happy smile. There it is, she said. The truth finally showed up, but just 10 minutes too late. Daniels tried to speak, but the words tangled on his tongue. "Ma'am, I didn't know." She cut him off with a small motion of her hand. "You didn't want to know." The crowd started murmuring now, their whispers filling the air. A man yelled, "You stopped the wrong person." Another added, "That's what happens when you judge too fast." Daniel's face turned red as he looked at all the phones pointed his way. He suddenly seemed smaller, no longer the man in charge. Maya glanced down at Rex and Shadow. "At ease," she murmured softly. The dogs immediately relaxed, sitting by her feet like statues carved from calm and strength. "Ma'am," Hayes said, stepping forward, "please, let us make this right." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "You can start," she said, "by treating people with the respect you expect to receive." Hayes nodded slowly, ashamed but sincere. "Yes, ma'am." Then she looked back at Daniels, the one who had led it all, the man who still couldn't look her in the eye. "And you," she said, her voice steady, "should remember something." He swallowed. "What's that?" "Fear doesn't make you powerful," she said softly. "Control does. But you can't control what you don't understand, and you clearly don't understand respect." Her words hit like a thunderclap. Daniel's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked at her not as a suspect, but as someone above him, not by rank, but by dignity. The tension began to ease as Maya reached into her truck and retrieved a small folder. She opened it slowly, showing her military service papers and medals inside. "This is who I am," she said. "A soldier, a daughter, a citizen who's done nothing wrong but drive home while black. Remember that before you point a gun or raise your voice next time." Hayes's eyes glistened. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once, then gave another quiet command. Rex and Shadow stood up and returned to the truck without hesitation, their movements disciplined and precise. As Maya opened the driver's door, she turned one last time toward the officers. "You surrounded me because you thought I was a threat," she said. "But maybe the real threat was your own judgment." Then she got into her truck, started the engine, and slowly drove away. The two dogs sat upright in the back seat, staring out the window as the blue and red lights faded behind them. And in that quiet moment, the officers finally realized what they had just witnessed. Not defiance, not violence, but pure, unshakable power wrapped in silence. The kind of power they would never forget. The next day, the sun rose over the small town as if nothing had happened. But for the officers who had stopped Maya Thompson, the world suddenly felt heavier. The video from the parking lot had already spread online. People were sharing it faster than they could control it, labeling it "the veteran and the dogs." Millions watched the moment when a calm black woman faced down 4 officers with nothing but discipline, courage, and 2 loyal military dogs. Maya woke up early that morning to her phone buzzing nonstop. Dozens of messages, some from friends, some from strangers, filled her inbox. Words like hero, inspiration, and respect flooded the screen. But she didn't smile. She didn't feel victorious. She just sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the sunlight coming through the curtains, thinking about what had almost happened. 10 seconds, she whispered to herself. That's how close it was. Downstairs, Rex and Shadow waited patiently by the door. They sensed her mood, quiet, steady, but heavy. She poured herself a cup of coffee and turned on the TV. The morning news was already showing her face. Retired U.S. Army K-9 Sergeant Maya Thompson confronted racial profiling with grace and composure. The incident has reignited debates on police training and discrimination. She muted the TV. Her mind drifted to the young officer, Hayes, the only one who had hesitated, the only one whose eyes had shown doubt instead of arrogance. Maybe there was still hope, she thought. Maybe someone had learned something. Across town, the police chief sat in his office watching the same footage. His face was tight with concern. The phones in his department hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Reporters, activists, lawyers, and everyone wanted answers. "This is a PR nightmare," he muttered, rubbing his forehead. Then he sighed. "But she handled herself better than my men did." By noon, the chief called for an emergency press conference. Cameras crowded the steps of the police station. The air buzzed with tension and flashing lights. Standing at the podium, he cleared his throat. "Yesterday's incident involving Sergeant Maya Thompson was unacceptable," he began. "We are launching a full internal investigation. The officers involved are on administrative leave pending review. When reporters asked if Maya would be pressing charges, the chief shook his head. That's her decision. But I can tell you this, when we owe her an apology. Meanwhile, Maya sat in her living room watching it all unfold on her laptop. She wasn't looking for revenge. She didn't need it. What she wanted was change. She whispered softly to Rex, "Looks like the truth travels faster than lies, doesn't it?" The dog wagged his tail, sensing her calm returning. Later that evening, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Officer Hayes stood there, in no uniform, no badge, just a nervous young man holding his cap in his hands. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I came to apologize." Personally. Maya studied his face for a moment before stepping aside. "Come in," she said. He entered carefully, eyes darting toward the two dogs sitting silently nearby. "I just wanted to say, I should have spoken up sooner. I knew it was wrong, but I froze." Maya nodded slowly. "Freezing doesn't make you weak," she said. "Staying silent after you thaw out does." Hayes lowered his head. "I guess I learned more in one day than in all my years of training." She poured him a cup of coffee and said, "Then use it. Teach the others what you saw." That's how change starts. Not with shouting, but with understanding. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You handled it better than any of us could have, ma'am. You didn't just protect yourself. You protected us from doing something we'd regret forever." Her expression softened. "That's what soldiers do," she replied. "Even when the war isn't theirs." As he left, the sky was painted gold by the setting sun. Maya stood by the door, watching him walk to his car. She could feel the weight of the day lifting slightly. Maybe, just maybe, this story would lead to something good. That night, as she scrolled through her phone, she saw a new headline spreading across social media. She didn't bark back. The calm power of Maya Thompson. She smiled faintly at the phrase. It wasn't about her bravery, her medals, or her dogs. It was about control, about proving that quiet strength could silence even the loudest prejudice. In her living room, Rex and Shadow lay near her feet, peaceful at last. Maya looked at them and whispered, "We didn't need to fight, boys. We just needed to stand." The dogs stirred slightly, as if they understood every word. And for the first time since that morning, Maya felt peace, and not because the world had changed, but because she had made it take one small, necessary step toward it. 2 weeks passed since that morning, yet the memory of the flashing light still lingered in Maya's mind like an echo that refused to fade. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. At the grocery store, the park, even the small diner where she used to eat breakfast quietly in a corner. Some smiled, some whispered, and some approached her with tears in their eyes, saying, "Thank you for standing up with grace." Maya didn't see herself as a hero. She wasn't looking for attention. She just wanted peace, and the same peace she had fought to protect for 15 years in uniform. But now her story had grown larger than her. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops, Maya received an unexpected call. "Sergeant Thompson," said a firm but polite voice on the line. "This is Captain Rivera from the State Police Academy. We'd like you to come speak to our recruits." She blinked, surprised. "Speak about what?" "About control," Rivera said simply. "About how you handled something that could have gone very wrong." The next morning, she arrived at the academy in her old uniform. It still fit perfectly. The clean olive fabric, the sharp creases, the small insignia on her chest that read K9 Division. Rex and Shadow walked proudly by her side, wearing their own service vests. The recruits gathered in silence as she entered the hall. Rivera introduced her with a short nod. This woman faced 4 armed officers with nothing but discipline and 2 dogs who trusted her completely. "Pay attention. You'll learn more in the next 10 minutes than in a month of lectures." The room was silent. Maya stepped forward, her boots echoing against the polished floor. Her voice was calm but firm. "I want to tell you a story," she began. "Not about anger, but about control. Because control is what separates justice from chaos." She told them everything. The flashing lights, the shouts, the hands on holsters, the moment she gave a single whistle and turned fear into silence. Her words were simple, but her presence was commanding. Even the most confident recruits sat straighter, their eyes wide. "When I served overseas," she said, "I learned that real strength doesn't always show itself through violence. It shows when you can stop violence without pulling the trigger." She paused, then added softly, But that takes respect. For yourself, for others, for the badge you wear. She glanced down at her dogs, who sat patiently at her feet. These two don't understand hate or pride. They only understand loyalty. Maybe that's why I trust them more than most people. The room fell quiet. One young recruit finally raised his hand. "Ma'am," he asked hesitantly, "weren't you scared that day?" Maya smiled faintly. "Of course I was. But fear is a tool. You can let it control you, or you can use it to control yourself." Her answer hung in the air, heavy with truth. The young officers nodded slowly, understanding something deeper than their training manuals could ever teach. After the session ended, Captain Rivera approached her. "Sergeant, you just did in one speech what years of policy never could," he said quietly. Maya smiled. "I didn't lecture them, Captain. I just reminded them what humanity sounds like." Before she left, several recruits gathered around her, asking to meet Rex and Shadow. The dogs responded with calm affection, disciplined but kind. The young officers laughed softly, realizing that these animals, trained for war, radiated more peace than most people did. Later, as Maya drove home, the late afternoon light filtered through the windshield. The world outside seemed a little softer, a little more aware. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from a national news anchor asking her to appear on television. She sighed, shaking her head with a small smile. "The world doesn't need another speech," she murmured. "It needs better listeners." At a red light, she turned to look at Rex and Shadow in the rearview mirror. They sat there calm and alert as always. "You two did good," she said softly. "You made them see." Rex's ear twitched. Shadow gave a quiet huff, resting his head on his paws. The light turned green. As Maya's truck rolled forward, she felt something shift deep within her. Not anger, not pride, but quiet fulfillment. The world had seen her dogs as weapons once. Now they were symbols of control, strength, and restraint, living proof that dignity could defeat hate without ever raising a fist. And as the evening sun painted the horizon gold, Maya whispered to herself, "Sometimes the most powerful act of courage is simply standing your ground and refusing to become what they expect you to be." The days rolled into weeks, but the fire Maya had started kept spreading. News networks called her the calm veteran, and her video had reached millions across the world. People from every country sent her letters. Soldiers, mothers, police officers, even children. Some thanked her for her courage. Others confessed how her silence had made them rethink their own anger. Maya didn't chase fame, but fame found her anyway. Her face was everywhere. Interviews, articles, documentaries. Yet she stayed the same quiet woman who still walked her dogs every morning at sunrise. Her neighbors would wave and say, "Morning, Sergeant." And she'd smile back with that calm, unshakable grace that had become her trademark. One cold morning, a black SUV pulled up outside her small farmhouse. Out stepped a man in a suit, tall, polite, official. He introduced himself as Deputy Commissioner Lewis from the Department of Justice. "Sergeant Thompson," he said respectfully, "we're launching a national review on law enforcement behavior and community relations. We'd like your help designing new training protocols." Maya blinked, surprised. "You want me to train the police?" Lewis nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We want what you have. Control, composure, and integrity under pressure." Maya hesitated. "I'm not a politician. I'm a soldier who just wanted to go home that day." He smiled slightly. "That's exactly why we want you. You didn't fight them with anger. You showed them what real discipline looks like." She looked down at Rex and Shadow, sitting patiently at her side. Their eyes were steady, waiting for her decision. After a long pause, she said softly, "All right. But if I do this, it's not about punishing people. It's about teaching them." Lewis nodded firmly. "That's what this country needs. Teachers, not warriors." 2 months later, Maya found herself standing inside a massive federal auditorium filled with hundreds of officers, deputies, and cadets. Cameras flashed, not out of celebrity but respect. She wore her uniform again, not for pride, but for purpose. Her opening words were simple, but they carried more weight than any order. Power means nothing if you lose your humanity using it. She didn't lecture them with statistics. She told them stories about fear, about mistakes, about the thin line between reaction and control. She explained how one wrong assumption could destroy 2 lives in a second, and how 10 seconds of calm could save them both. At one point, she called Rex and Shadow forward. The two dogs obeyed instantly, sitting at her feet like silent guardians. "These are my partners," she said. "They don't care what someone looks like. They only react to intent. If only we humans could learn to do the same." A murmur spread through the hall, admiration mixed with humility. Some officers wiped their eyes quietly. When her speech ended, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. The applause wasn't loud or wild, and it was slow, steady, filled with genuine respect. Even hardened veterans of the force stood taller, as if reminded of why they'd taken their oaths in the first place. After the event, Captain Rivera, the same man who had invited her to speak weeks earlier, approached her again. "You've done something powerful, Sergeant," he said. "You didn't just change minds. You changed hearts." Maya smiled faintly. "Hearts change slower than laws," she said. "But once they do, they never go back." As she walked outside, the evening sky was painted with deep orange light. A crowd of young recruits waited for her by the steps holding notebooks and phones. One of them, a young black woman in uniform, stepped forward nervously. "Ma'am, because of you, I joined the academy," she said. "I want to serve right, not with fear but with respect." Maya felt a lump in her throat. She reached out, resting a hand on the young woman's shoulder. "Then you'll already be better than most," she said softly. Behind her, Rex and Shadow stood proudly, tail still, eyes forward. The crowd began clapping again, not because of fame, not because of the viral video, but because they were looking at someone who had turned a moment of humiliation into a movement of hope. As she stepped into her truck, Maya looked at her reflection in the mirror. She saw a soldier, yes, but also something more. A teacher, a protector, a symbol. 10 minutes of disrespect, she whispered to herself, starting the engine, and now a lifetime of lessons. The wind carried her words softly into the night as she drove away. 2 dogs beside her, the city behind her, and a quiet new mission ahead.